Hey, this is Brandon McManus, Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion, and you listen to The Scoop on alscoop.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, alscoop.com's podcast, Season 6, Episode 33. Sam Cohn, what episode is this?
Larry Bird.
There you go. It took you way too long to get that.
I was trying to unmute. Sorry.
Kareem, right?
Kareem was 33. Tony Dorsett.
Blaise Caponegro was 33.
Blaise Caponegro. That's good. That's good Temple football knowledge by you, Kyle.
Before he became a single digit.
It was 8, right? Was he an 8? Was
He
Blaise
was 6 or 8? He was a
6.
6.
Yeah, Blaise was 6.
Yeah.
There got to be a bunch. What other 33s? It was Tony Dorsett was 33. I mentioned Hersey Hawkins last week. Or no, maybe Tony Dorsett was not 33.
No, he was. You're right.
When we were talking about our favorite numbers last week, I mentioned 33. I was a big Hersey Hawkins guy.
Shaq. Didn't Shaq?
Well, Dobbins.
Shaq
Kyle
was
Dobbins
30.
33.
Shaq was
Dobbins.
32.
Shaq was
Shaq was
33 on
32.
the Suns.
Yes.
There you
We
go.
can talk about Kyle
Oh,
Dobbins.
Scottie Pippen wore 33,
Scottie
right?
Pippen.
Oh,
32.
that's right, he did.
Yeah, there you go. That's a better one.
Talk about Dobbins a little later. Got to mention from Rod Carey earlier this week. So again,
We missed
Kyle Gass.
Patrick Ewing, Frank Robinson.
Brunson wore 33?
Ooh boy, you.
There's a low-hanging fruit. You got to take them every now and then.
Yes. Maybe we'll get an angry text message about that. So anyway, Kyle Gauss, Sam Cohn, and Sam Newman with me as always. Happy to be joined by these fine people on this podcast. It's a great weather day out there. Hope you guys are enjoying it and hope you guys will enjoy this episode. Spring football has wrapped up. We'll talk a lot about that. More basketball recruiting news to get out there. Lots of mailbag questions to get to as well. Of course,
Can I say something?
Of course, you can say anything you want.
It's not a nice weather day.
Well, yeah, because people aren't. Well, wait, what don't you like about it?
I'm not acclimated to like 88 degrees yet. Like I need that like, okay, it's 78, 79, it's 80, it's 78, 79, like that consistently nice weather. It can't go from 60 to 88 to 61.
It's too fast of a jump.
Yes. My body needs to change.
Is this like your first spring?
I feel like I'm in
Philadelphia?
Charlotte. This is what Charlotte weather is like. It's the worst.
And you know why? You know what? We won that war. Okay. We don't have to have Charlotte weather. I live up here so it can be in the 70s and I can just be maintaining this and I slowly adjust to it and then it gets really hot and I go to the shore and then it comes back and it's not hot anymore. But now with this crap, April 88 degrees? No.
Yesterday's
No,
weather
no.
was perfect. Well, it was like in the 70s all day. It was
Yes.
great. And
You
then
make
today
it
is
sound like,
27.
but you make it sound like Philadelphia is uber consistent with its weather. It's not. It's never.
No, it's not.
never
But it doesn't mean
surprised.
I'm not allowed to complain about it. I can compartmentalize May, June, July, August sucks. September and April weather in Philadelphia is supposed to be great. Like temperature
Makes you feel better. 2 weeks ago, in the middle of April, it snowed at my house,
Mhm.
like 2 inches, 3 inches,
Sam,
and it
didn't
was
you
50
play-
and sunny here.
Did you play golf this morning?
I did. I played my first round of the year.
How'd
How'd
you
it
do?
go?
I went to the range 2 days ago, and then played 18 this morning. It went okay. I had some good holes. I had some really, really bad holes. Overall, kind of exactly how I expected the first day of the year to go, but only getting better from here. It
Who'd you
felt
play-
good to be out there. The weather was amazing. So
Who'd
it
you
was a lot
play
of fun. Brian Mermelstein, friend of the show,
Friend of the show, friend of the advanced sports.
and one of your
podcast.
students.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it was just you and Merm. No Ray Don. No Carolina. State.
No, it was the two of us, and then we were supposed to play in a foursome with two random people, and one of the people didn't show up. So it was just one guy. His son was supposed to come with him, and his son didn't show up. So it was just the three of us. It was Brian, myself, and this random older dude who was a nice guy.
Wasn't there an incident that happened involving your head getting hit with something?
Oh yeah, John, you'll get a crack at this one. The guy was making some comment, but not in a bad way. Like he was like, "Oh, when you on your drive, like try to do this," and was kind of like going back and forth, and then went a little too hard and knocked the back of my head a little bit. Nothing bad, but like knocked the back of my head a little bit.
I would hate the first part of that. If you're like a random addition to my pair and you're trying to give me like swing advice, it's like get the F out of here, man. Like that's not what this is about.
I don't really care. I'm not good enough to be like screw you. Like,
I mean, I'd be
I'll
like,
take-
oh
I'll
yeah, I
take it.
appreciate that, but I wouldn't implement any of it.
So, spring football.
My wife told me yesterday I should work better on my empathy, and I don't think I'm good at that
That's
yet.
not, again, not the first time.
I got a lot of tools in my toolkit. That's not one of them.
And your
Kyle,
response was,
marathon, not a sprint.
Did you say something? Did you say something to her? Or was this something that you said about somebody else? Both are plausible.
Both are applicable, probably too. It was kind of like a hybrid situation, but for the most part, it was somebody else.
And on at
Kyle's
least a few
response
occasions-
was, I don't care what you want me to do. I don't care what you think. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
I'm gonna be me.
several times where Kyle has said something to me and Meg has reprimanded him, and Kyle basically says he's used to this. What do you want me to say?
I don't care what anybody say. I'm gonna be me. Stay hood, stay raised in the streets. Let's scoop.
All right. Big news to come out of big news / maybe expected news, good news to come out of spring ball, not bearing the lead here. Rod Carey officially named, at least to reporters, D'Wan Mathis, the Georgia transfer, as his number one quarterback coming out of spring ball, saying that he's the clear number one quarterback. Real Mitchell, the Iowa State transfer, who obviously played some snaps last year, started the UCF game, is the clear number two. And then he went on to say that he's looking forward to seeing Duncan, even Justin Lynch, and Mariano Valente kind of fighting it out and competing for the number 3 spot. So again, good news, expected news there. We're also going to go around the horn in a little bit and talk about one thing that we feel each of us learned from spring ball. Again, it ended up being compressed into a period of 3 weeks, but obviously just, very simply and plainly a big step for the program in the fact that they got spring drills this year as opposed to last spring when they did not get them. Obviously, it sounds like one of those no kidding kind of statements, but I think it's a big deal that D'Wan Mathis comes out of the spring as the clear starter, and this thing isn't lingering into the summer. Now, that could all be semantics. It could just be, who cares? At the end of the day, he has to go out there in September and win games. But I think it's a good thing for him because, you're looking back, and maybe this is just me. I want you guys to react to this. You're looking at a guy who verbally committed to Michigan State. I'm always leaving out of school. Michigan State, Ohio State, Georgia.
Iowa State.
Iowa
The first
State.
one.
Iowa State, Michigan State, Ohio State, Georgia. Goes to Georgia, starts the opener, loses the starting job, and from the outside looking in, and again, I've never met D'Wan Mathis before, but sounds like he came in, won over his teammates, and at least the storyline coming out of the spring is not, okay, here's a former 4-star recruit and a Georgia transfer. What's the catch? Is there something there? Is he just not as good as his recruiting profile would suggest? But again, it's got a lot left ahead of him, but seems like he came in and outright won the job, has to continue winning the job. But Rod Carey said some good things about him. I think it's a really good thing for the program because if this thing lingered into the summer, short of them kind of, trying to pull a smokescreen with theatrics and stuff like that, if it was really a thing where they're like, we still don't know, then I think the narrative would be, they lost Anthony Russo to Michigan State. You bring in this high profile transfer from Georgia and you still don't know who your starter is coming out of the spring. What's going on? It kind of just piles on and piles on and piles on. Again, we say it every week. For those of you who might be listening to this podcast for the first time, reporters don't get access to spring ball. We get access to interviews. We're appreciative of that, but we can't see with our own eyes. But I mean, am I overstating something that's really simple here to say that this is an important development to say, yeah, we like what we've seen here. He is what we thought he would be. He's our starter.
No, I don't think you're overstating it or putting it on too high of a pedestal or anything like that. I mean, I kind of rewind the clock to back before he committed, and we kind of knew it was coming, and we're just waiting for him to get announced and blah, blah. And I reached out to somebody whose opinion I trusted on this, and I pretty much asked what that hypothetical was, which was not even hypothetical, but I asked that question of, hey, was he just over recruited? Like, does his recruiting profile not match up with his skill set? Was he got to look good in camps? Like, what happened there? And the guy told me, he goes, no, like, I don't get that impression at all. I don't get the impression it's the cast off. He just had the unfortunate circumstance where he was playing so young in a league that you cannot play young at quarterback unless you're like Tua. Like, you can't be like a freshman in the SEC and go through those growing pains at Georgia, because you're going to be quickly pulled and you're going to get the crap kicked out of you against some really good defenses. So I think if he hadn't come into Temple and just run away with this job, which by all stretch of the imagination, it sounds like that's what he did. Because, I mean, we won the clock 3 weeks ago and Rod Carey said, like, hey, ideally you want somebody to come in and just blow you away, and he is the starter after the spring. And guess what? 3 weeks later, D'Wan Mathis is the starter coming out of the spring. So I think it kind of does take away a little bit of those question marks of, was he over recruited? Is he not that good? Like, is he just a name with 4 stars next to him, or is he actually that good of a player? There's less question marks. But I think the bigger ramification is, just because some players are here right now on April 28th does not mean they had to be here on June 1st. They could have still entered the transfer portal after the spring if you're one of Temple's skilled players that you came in, you went through spring ball, and then you didn't like what you saw. But I think naming D'Wan Mathis having that good of a spring helps you kind of calm the waters there and keep some people in the program that may have got people in their ears being like, hey, why would you want to stay at Temple? They haven't even figured out their quarterback situation yet. So I think there's downstream roster ramifications that are positives.
Yeah, I would agree with Kyle's point. I don't think it's overstated at all. I mean, you listen to Rod Carey, what he had to say yesterday. He was practically fawning over Mathis. I mean, 3 different times he lauded his skill set, his athleticism, everything that he brings to the table physically. And he pretty much pointed the question to us, the reporters, that like, hey, you guys haven't been able to see, but like, this kid can do it all. So it sounded like they never I would doubt they promised him the job. They wanted him to come in and fight for it, but obviously they wanted to get him comfortable with the offense. It's probably at a place where they think he knows the offense well enough, and they saw what he could do physically, that they're like, okay, we have to name this guy the starter. He's done enough. He's earned it. And quite frankly, like Kyle said, I mean, he pretty much probably kept Jaden Blue and Randall Jones here. Like, I don't know if I can say that in convincingly, but
you just did.
Maybe, but they kind of pointed to that. I mean, with the conversations that they had and whatnot. So he's going to play an integral part of what they do this year, whether they take that next step or not. And I think it was important for them to name him the starter, because Carey just doesn't seem like a head coach who wants to deal with that speculation at all. He seems somebody that he's going to put that to rest. I mean, obviously when, it's not the same situation, but he was pretty adamant that even when he had, Tread, Beatty, like biting at, whatever, and Real Mitchell come in, he's like, Anthony's my starter. Like he was pretty adamant about that. So I don't think any of us really anticipated for this to like drag on, but I mean, I think Dewan did enough behind the scenes and in front of his coaches and teammates to win everybody over with his, his ability to lead, his athleticism, his play strength, his arm, all of that. I think Temple's in a good spot with right now, and I think you can't look at any of this as a bad thing.
All right, so here's a quote from Rod Carey, one of the few clips where he's talking about D'Wan Mathis. Again, he spoke with reporters on Tuesday to kind of close out spring football media availability. He was asked, what separated D'Wan Mathis from the rest of the pack, and here's what Rod Carey said.
D'Wan's rate of improvement in comfort with the offense. Listen, his physical skills are out of the world as far as athletically and arm strength. I think getting comfort with the offense to make decisions more consistently is the thing that he wants to improve on, and we want to see him improve on. But certainly he had great growth in that this entire spring, and it was fun to watch.
All right, so there you hear Rod Carey talking about Mathis's rate of improvement, comfort with the offense. That's what set him apart. And yeah, he goes on to say his physical skills are out of this world. Getting comfortable with the offense obviously is going to be the key part there. Another thing, again, I don't know if this is oversimplifying things, but I also think it's a good thing that Real Mitchell is right there as the number 2. I mean, there's a guy who, doesn't quite have the recruiting profile of D'Wan Mathis, but was a fairly notable recruit coming out of California, goes to Iowa State, ends up at Temple. Seems like a pretty nice guy. Things could have gone one way or the other for him. I mean, he could have said, they're bringing in this guy from Georgia. Am I ever going to get the chance to start? And maybe a guy like, there was a little bit of chatter about Mariano Valente, maybe a guy like Duncan, Rod Carey likes to say he's got some crap to him. They like Duncan. Maybe he could have slipped by and not focused and really dropped down to number 3, but stuck with it. You hope that D'Wan Mathis stays healthy. You hope that anybody hopes their quarterback stays healthy, but seems like he kind of rose to the occasion and stuck with it in the quarterback competition there, and didn't kind of languish down to like the third spot on the depth chart. So I guess you could see that as a positive too, but I don't know if that's kind of bright siding things.
I mean, I think it's a positive. I think it was also kind of an expectation, right? I mean, he was the only one coming back that had really played once Trev Betty retired. Because I mean, Matt Duncan had his opportunity and didn't get a chance for whatever reason. So I mean, I was actually kind of taken back a little bit by Carey's verbiage, I guess, for talking about Real Mitchell. Because he's like, well, technically he's our number 2, but hey, I'm looking forward to seeing what Justin Lynch, who became Mount Carmel's all-time leading passer this week, and Matt Duncan and Mariano Valenti have a chance to do. So I kind of get the impression there that, like, yeah, hey, Real, you're the number 2 here, and like you have the inside track to be number 2, but like these guys are on your heels with this. Like, this is still a competition.
Good point.
You think he says that just so he doesn't want, like, you know, the competition to die down in that room? Maybe use it as a motivating factor for Real to kind of like not get complacent, and then for, you know, Justin, Mariano, and Matt to kind of keep fighting to get that. Well, Justin hasn't been here, but you get the point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I mean, I think it was kind of also the argument for not naming D'Wan Mathis the starter, because like you didn't want Real Mitchell to get down in the dumps and not compete. So I mean, I think you can trickle that down from the number 2 seed too, but like number 2 seed, the number 2 spot in the depth chart. But I think when John and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, I don't remember if it was on this or if it was via text or what, but I think John's when we kind of floated that, John, I think you said like, well, nobody's really proven anything yet to the point. So it's not like any of these guys have been like, hey, I went out and I started 3 games, I went 2-1, and now you're telling me I'm the number 3 quarterback. Like, I feel like there's such a stew going on in there that, like, I don't think you really need to convince these guys that, hey, everything's up for grabs.
Well, after the way Mitchell ended his season, I think he needed to come out and prove himself, because if you remember how Rod Carey talked about him after the Central Florida game, it was not anything to write home about. Granted, they had makeshift offensive line. You had Tavon Rowland starting at running back, and
it's just so hard to judge anybody off of last year for one positive or negative. It's just so
probably
hard.
In the coaching staff's mind, they're like, okay, Real hasn't done anything, so he probably needs to come in and improve himself. I mean, I would probably view it as that. So, like you said, it's not like anybody accomplished anything on and off the field to really warrant one way or the other.
Right. I saw I don't even remember where I saw it, but somebody at some point was talking about like, oh, well, when I watched Mathis, I saw that he floats the ball and he does this and blah, blah. Like, what are you basing that off of? You were basing that off of like 35 snaps as a redshirt freshman in the SEC, 12 months after he had a brain cyst removed. Like, there is just nothing you can compare any of these people off of that like the only people that can really compare these two are the people that have seen these people and these 2 players in practice over the last 3 weeks.
Not to mention, I mean, he was a guy who missed all of his freshman year, and then he comes in without much of they didn't spring practice or really summer. I mean, they had workouts, but it was like limited. So you're asking somebody who was away from the game from that long to really, come in and be the starter, which is, I mean, as we all know, is no easy task.
That's hard to do at Monmouth or Rutgers or Towson, let alone at like an SEC school like Georgia. Mm-hmm. So I mean, hell, for all we know, D'Wan Mathis is going to go out there and he's going to disappoint and all this. Like, we have no idea. But the fact of the matter is that the coaching staff determined after 15 games that it was such a far and away difference that this decision was made, which I don't see how that can be anything but a positive.
One other final thing before we move on to a few things we learned from the spring. I think it might have been Mark Narducci who asked Rod, is there any scenario where he could lose the job heading into end of the season? I believe Rod Carey said something to the effect, he said, unless there's injury or terrible play. And then he went on to say his skill set is really impressive. So it sounds like a pretty firm decision as of now.
Yeah, that's the one thing you couldn't do, right? You can't be like, hey, this is D'Wan Mathis's job, and then like 2 weeks into the fall practice be like, well, I mean, actually, like, Real is really pushing them. So like I feel like that's just how Rod kind of views starting quarterbacks in general. I mean, you're going to get hurt or you're going to really shit the bed and I'm going to have to pull you.
Well, don't we kind of know what he's probably going to end up saying in the fall already? Like, oh, everybody looks good. They're pushing each other, that sort of stuff. That's going to be a speak there.
Like, I mean, that's been the case for that's been the case for like 2 weeks now. Like, even when they were saying like, oh yeah, like this is a competition, blah blah. Like, everything we were hearing and everything other players were saying and all this was alluding to the fact that like D'Wan is the starting quarterback.
Matt and Mariano are doing a good job of learning the offense. They can get back to me now.
Which they are. I get that, but like they are still just like young quarterbacks that need to spend their time learning the system even more.
All right, let's go around the horn here. It's each of us talk about one thing you think that you learned after 15 spring practices.
This sounds like an ice breaking thing. Like I think you would have in like a meeting.
It is an icebreaker. Where are you from? Favorite color?
What's your fun fact?
Yeah, what's your fun fact?
Fun fact.
I asked a representative from a vendor today, just like kill time. I was like, if you were on a talent show, like if there was Mr. Blah blah blah, and you had to like do a talent, what would your talent be? And his answer was, I can blow bubbles with my mouth really well. It's, Jesus Christ! Like, so it's not a talent. It's gross.
Like saliva bubbles.
I assumed. What else are you gonna blow bubbles with?
Big League Chew.
I also that's also just not a talent that like translates well to like a visual aid. Like no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, let's zoom in this camera here on John DeCarlo blowing bubbles.
Oof. Sam Cohn, do you want to give us a fun fact, or you just want to go right into football here? We'll take either one.
I'm happy to give you my fun fact, but I'm not going to perform the fun fact on the scoop. My fun fact, because I do it every time. I've definitely brought this up on the scoop. My fun fact is always that I can do the alphabet backwards. I said in your class. I said in your class on the first day of class, and you made me do it in front of the class. I don't mind doing it. It's not a big deal. It's just we have more important things to talk about. But that is my go-to fun fact, is that I can do it backwards. Would you like me to start for my interesting thing from spring
football takeaway, Sam?
Spring football takeaway. So something we touched on a little bit last week on the scoop was the change in the backfield, change in terms of Gabe Infante talking about when he met with reporters that he had spent pretty much the whole offseason thinking about or studying how he can utilize multiple different skill sets with the depth they have in the backfield between Iverson Clement, bringing in Iverson Clement, Rayvon Bonner, adding to a couple guys like Kyle Dobbins and Ed Saydee who are returning and have been impressive. He's been trying to figure out how to make that work. I think the most interesting thing that we've seen is both that they brought those two guys into the transfer portal, that it's clear they have depth, and it's going to be a very different backfield from what it was last year. Because for the majority, pretty much the entirety of the season, Ray Davis took majority of the snaps out of the backfield, and the rest of the running back room kind of had the leftovers, where it was really just Ray Davis's backfield. So I think what you're going to see this fall is a much more in and out, much more utilizing different guys' strengths in different situations. And I think the thing that helps that is the fact that they have such an experienced offensive line. So that's at least one thing for them to be excited about, for fans to be excited about. One thing to really keep an eye on is how does, come week one, how does Gabe Infante manage those rotations? And the other interesting thing that we heard from Rod Carey the other day when he met with reporters was not only was Gabe Infante very high on Ed Saydee after the Temple's first spring practice scrimmage, Rod Carey was also had some words of praise for Ed Saydee and what he's been able to do in the last 3 weeks. So to hear that that's not just coming out of the running back room, to hear that's coming from the head coach, that Ed Sadee's doing things that that he's impressing his coaches, he's doing a lot of things well, and he's carving out a role with two guys transferring in from Power 5 schools. I think it's at least noteworthy that he's received such high praise when asked who's someone that's flashed or that stood out to you in spring ball, and the first name both the head coach and the running backs coach say is Ed Saydee. I thought that was at least interesting.
So here's Rod Carey talking quickly about Ed Saydee, and you'll hear him say here how he's graded out as the most consistent back in that group.
Yeah, Ed Saydee really had a great spring. Probably graded out the most consistent, hard running behind his pads, running through tackles. Really happy with Ed and his assignments and everything. But then liked what I saw from Dobbins, liked what I saw from Ali Barkley, really liked what I saw for AI. All those guys have different things that they need to do to become more consistent. And Onassis Neely was out this spring, and so was Tavon Ruley. So, hopefully looking forward to getting those guys back at some point and getting them in the mix too. And we know Tavon has played a lot of football, so feel good about the room. Ed probably separated himself this spring But I think there's going to be a lot more competition in the fall.
All right, so I'll ask this question, and if I feel like if Ed Saydee listens to this podcast, he's going to think that I'm doubting him for a second week in a row. But I think we talked about this last week, and I'll bring it up again. We talked about the fact that Rayvon Bonner appeared to be out for most of spring, right? Because he is being careful about. He did test positive for COVID, or he was just
he tested positive for COVID, and then when he first spoke to the media, he was like, "I just got back on the field yesterday." And then he also talked about having a pre-existing condition with having asthma. So you could probably, if you want to, connect the dots, you could probably say, okay, they're probably being careful. He's a veteran guy. Does he need the snaps as much as Edward Saydee does?
So I'll ask this question again. And Ed Saydee was a very, very good player at Penn Charter, and it's good that they're excited about him. Are we having the same conversation first week of August? Is Rod Carey still singing the praises of Ed Saydee, saying he's distinguished himself more than anybody? Or is Rod Carey saying, it took Rayvon Bonner a couple of days to get his feet up, from underneath him, but he's really looking like the guy we thought he was coming out of Illinois and coming out of the Big Ten, and he's really starting to separate. He's a guy that can be versatile. He can cut. He can be a power back. Does the narrative change, or is this seriously an Ed Saydee might start and get 15 carries a game type of situation?
I think what you're hearing from the praise of Ed Saydee is not, he's going to be their go-to guy. He's going to be their lead guy. I think what you're hearing is confirmation of depth, because I think you can make a reasonable assumption that both Iverson Clement and Rayvon Bonner are probably going to play a pretty big and important role and get a significant number of the snaps. But when Gabe Infante talks about having that depth, utilizing different skills, being able to put different guys in different situations and utilizing each of their strengths, I think hearing multiple coaches talk about Ed Saydee so highly, speak of him so highly, I think only confirms that they do feel comfortable with the depth they have and in that plan moving forward.
I agree with that. I think you can make the argument that maybe Edward Saydee wouldn't have had the opportunity to kind of earn their trust if Rayvon Bonner was healthy. It's spring, so everyone gets a lot of reps, but maybe you would say okay, Rayvon's still going to get a lot more here. But I would agree. I think that just makes them more confident to know that in the event that Bonner and Clement and Rulli aren't able to perform at the level we need, or they get dinged up or whatever it is, we're more confident in Edward Saydee than we were in the fall. And it sounds like they're also a little more confident in Kyle Dobbins than they were in the fall. So it seems like there's legitimate depth there. Yes,
as I brought up earlier, we talked about number 33. Everybody's always intrigued by Kyle Dobbins. Again, it was a very good back at Sandy Austin Prep, Timber Creek. People had high hopes for him coming in. It's taken a few years for him to make an impact. Again, his name comes up, and he's been described as a home run threat, a big play guy, all different variations. Rod brought him up. He kind of ticked through the whole list. Again, even brought up Sadie, brought up Dobbins, Holly Barkley, called Iverson Clement AI, talked about the fact that Anastas Neely and Tavon Rulli are out. Did not mention Rayvon Bonner at all. So yeah, another interesting situation to keep an eye on there. So Sam Newman, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I want to talk about Kobe Wilson. That was a name that always came up, whether you were talking to his teammates, Rod Carey, Jeff Knowles, really anybody. His energy has been infectious from everything that we can hear. And I think the biggest thing is Rod. When I asked Rod if he's ever seen somebody like Kobe Wilson, he kind of mentioned, he laughed, and he was like, yeah, I kind of had to speak to George Reed I don't think this was in response to my question. I flubbed that, but somebody, I believe Dante Colinelli asked Rod, what that competition is as the weak side linebacker. And George Reed is really being pushed by Kobe Wilson. He kind of told, and Rod said that he told George Reed, hey, you got to bring it because we know Kobe's going to bring it every day. So, that's just kind of the player that they're getting in him. And Rod kind of said, if he doesn't do it now, he's going to be a big part of this program in the future. I fully expect him to be rotated. They're going to rotate a lot at linebacker. I think we would anticipate that. Reed and Kwenku, if there's one guy who plays the majority of snaps, it's probably going to be Will Kwenku and not Reed, just because Reed doesn't have, the starting linebacker experience, and nor does he, have probably that hold of a position that Kwenku does that, that Reed had, that Kwenku does. As for Kobe, just listening to the story with him talking about how Georgia wanted him to come in and play on special teams, and even mention playing a linebacker. he has that chip on his shoulder, that just everything about him, and the way that, when he spoke to me, the story that we did for the site, that, he wants to be a part of the program. He's all in. He's looking forward to being a leader. I think the fact that you have somebody who's still technically a true freshman who stepped up like a leader like this is kind of unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure it's happened in other locker rooms before, but it's not something that I can recall happening here. Just the way that he's been able to come in and kind of command it. And I mean, he wasn't afraid to call out. I mean, when he spoke with me, that conversation, he wasn't afraid to call out the guys who left. He was like, they were kind of like, you could kind of tell that they were just leaders because they were veterans. And he kind of just was like, so what? Like, who cares how long you've been here? So I think, if you're looking at faces of it's hard to say college football is their face of the team, but if you're looking at the face of the team on defense for the next couple of years, it's definitely Kobe Wilson. And I think he's a player that's going to be worth following and seeing who's on the field. And would we really be surprised if he's somebody who gets a single digit? I would be a little surprised, but it wouldn't be like shocking. What do you guys think about Kobe Wilson single digit?
Like in the future or like this year?
Maybe this year, just because of the way that he's stepping up as a leader already. Or you think that would be
it's not unprecedented. So
yeah, because
people look at Rocky Sin, but the thing that really sticks out to me is there's two examples. Sean Chandler got a single digit like right away as like a true freshman. Granted, Champ was more of like I'm going to do this by my work ethic. I'm not necessarily the most vocal leader in the world. And even Nick Sharga. Like Nick Sharga transferred in from West Virginia Wesleyan or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And you didn't kind of hear about him because he was a walk-on. And then like almost out of nowhere, he got a single digit. I remember Phil Snow making an emphasizing to us, like single digit does not mean our best players. Like when Nick Sharga got, he's like, it does not mean that he is one of my best defensive players.
Did he preface that by saying, you got to remember,
I coached Pat Tillman.
Great Pat Tillman.
Yeah, and I'm going to in the future coach the Carolina Panthers. So I don't think it's unprecedented. I think if you put a gun to my head, is Kobe Wilson a single digit at any point in his career? I would say yes. He seems to be on that trajectory. But I think it might be a little too early. But that being said, I haven't really gone through the roster, but who's an obvious single digit guy?
But you think about it, it's voted upon by the teammates, so
sure.
They all think highly of him. So
yeah,
it could have. It's not out of the realm of the
definitely could happen.
I don't think any of us would be shocked if it happened, right? It would just be like, okay, like he just seems like a guy who commands everybody's respect in the locker room.
I think George Reed's actively trying to get one of those jerseys too, so that's a good thing. Which I think is actually a perfect segue to what I think I've learned this spring, which I feel like I kind of knew this coming in, but then this really almost cemented it. Is despite all of the departures, and yes, there were a crap ton of departures, there seems to be so much depth at positions that I would not have thought necessarily at the end of last year, which a lot of that is a byproduct of the fact they were forced to play so many people at linebacker and so many people at corner and so many people at safety. But other than the defensive line and the second unit of the offensive line, which obviously is a pretty big other than, because those are very important parts, there seems to be just as much depth, if not more depth, at every other position group than there was last year. Wide receivers, yes, you lost Brandon Mack to the NFL or to the NFL draft, but you added Amani Anderson. You're seeing Jose Barban grow. You're seeing Jordan Smith grow. You can go down the line in almost every position group. There just seems to be so much more depth, which hopefully, inevitably, there will be injuries that these guys are going to have to step up. So hopefully Temple is better equipped to withstand those blows than they were last year. And that's something I feel like this spring, with all the new names we're talking about, with Edward Saydee, we're talking about running back, we're talking about Kobe Wilson as a freshman pushing a linebacker, and we're talking about transfers like Keyshawn Paul being everything that they thought he was going to be, that this spring helped me cement my comfort level with a lot of these position groups.
Real quick, before I get to my point, we'll play a clip again. It's more Kobe Wilson stuff, but Rod Carey asking, have you seen, Sam, you might have asked him this, have you seen somebody, when was the last time you've seen somebody like Kobe come in and take command of a leadership role or take command of the locker room? I shouldn't say take command of the locker room. It's not like he's the only vocal guy on the team, but have you seen somebody do it this early? And here's what Rod Carey had to say.
He's doing an unbelievable job, and it starts with himself and his preparation, and then how he sets the example and holds everybody accountable. And he's just mission focused on what we're trying to get done. And it's fun to see. And I think that he is going to have a bright future with us. When that is completely his time frame. Could be sooner rather than later, but just really excited about him.
All right, so there you have Rod Carey saying no is the short answer. He's just mission focused. It's fun to see. So again, the Kobe Wilson, I don't want to call it the Kobe Wilson hype because then it sounds manufactured, but again, he's got his challenges as a player. He's more on the undersized side. He's 5'11". He's not 6'2" or 6'3", but again, one of the guys that you really want to be able to take advantage of that COVID year. As Sam mentioned, he's still technically a freshman. It'd be really fun to see that battle where Kobe Wilson and George Reed are battling it out. Seems like both are responding to it well. And there are a lot of things that stand out to me of just, recency bias. I think that, and this might be a little bit less of a significant point, that Rod Carey and the staff are still very, very much into the comings and goings of the transfer portal. And Rod Carey said flat out, yeah, we're still going to keep an eye on the transfer portal, and broke it down and say like either best available or adding depth to the O-line or the D-line. He said, quote, it's really waiver wire stuff. So the portal is still going to be a thing. So they lost a lot to it. And, again, we've talked about this before, and Rod Carey has every right to this opinion. He said, there was this skies falling, crowd, a reminder that the transfer portal again swings both ways. Sure, you could have bigger impact guys that we lost, but I think that some are further ahead, like Dewan, than some guys that we lost. So they're still very much into the portal. They're still keeping an eye on it. You can still see that there are some positions of interest for them. So after 3 weeks of spring ball, this roster is still a little bit of a work in process. But if you're them, you're hoping that it's a work in process where you're fine tuning certain areas. We'll have to see. Even if Rory Bell just got put on scholarship, does Rory Bell getting put on scholarship mean that he solidified himself as a starting place kicker, or are they still following junior college place kickers on social media? Are they going to look at someone on the D line in the portal? Because something that kind of, I think, not casually slipped by, but Zach Gill, one of the 2 North Carolina transfers, Rod said he's banged up. We're hoping to have him back mid to late season. And not to say that Zach Gill put up really significant numbers at North Carolina, but they were hoping that change of scenery would help him out. There's a guy that you could be without for most of the season. So what does that mean for who they might go after in the portal? What does that mean for, going to Nick Baggs and saying, hey, we really need you to step up now? So a couple of things to keep in mind there that stood out to me. All right. So in addition to spring football, it's also been a busy week for basketball, at least on the recruiting front. A few more offers went out, class of 2023 guys. Sam Cohn, what do you have for us?
Yes, 2 teammates, both high school and AAU. That's exciting for them. Ramir Barno and Justin Edwards, both 2023 guys, very different. But as I said, teammates at Emotep Charter and team final. So they've been playing together for a couple of years. I've read on Twitter that their chemistry has really come along. They're 2 guys that have really shown out in their AAU season and could really blow up in the next season or 2. But 2 guys with a lot of talent, and it's very telling that Temple is offering them this early. As I said, 2 2023 guys. Ramir Barno is a 5'11". I think I'll give him 6 foot, but I'm pretty sure he's 5'11" because nobody's actually 5'11". 5'11".
I am actually 5'11".
As am
yeah,
I.
but do you admit that?
Oh no, my driver's license says 6 foot.
Hey,
Exact same thing. My driver's license says 6 foot. Told my wife I was 6 feet when I met her.
Well, yeah, you had to get through the filters that she had in place.
Yeah.
But look, I'm not dating a dude under 6 foot, and you're like 6'2".
So Ramir
Thank you,
Barno's we'll call him a 6 foot point guard. Definitely much more of a floor general and a guy that can pass the ball. And then Justin Edwards is a 6'7". He's listed as like a wing forward. Again, not having seen much of any of either of them play at all, my assumption is that Justin Edwards is a similar style game to Zach Hicks with a little more meat on his bones. And Ramir Barno could have some Hysier Miller-esque traits to him, just like a smaller, tough guard. Again, I haven't seen either of them play. I haven't talked to either of them yet, But that's kind of my initial instinct. And as I said before, it's at least very noteworthy the talent they probably have if they're getting offers from Temple so far in advance of finishing their high school careers.
I would say the only thing with that is I think Justin Edwards, you hope he eventually has more meat on his bones, because right now I think he's still pretty rail skinny too. I think the more important part from this outside the actual offers is Temple aggressively offering local prospects in future classes, because that's something they really have not done in the past. They usually wait until like, okay, well, right now we're focused on the 2022 cycle and we'll view 2023 when we get to it. These are two guys that are going to be two of the bigger recruits in the city in 2023. And their hometown school is one of their first offers. So that is a step in the right direction if you are a Temple recruiting fan.
Exactly. And just one more thing to note is now Temple has dealt out 3 offers for the class of 2023. Sean Simmons was the other one who they offered a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly when. I would guess like December, January-ish.
I think it was actually rumored that. I think it was like September, yeah. Like early, it was like last fall. Yeah.
Oh. So
and since then he's gotten Pitt and Seton Hall and Butler.
Yeah, he's really blown up. So,
but it's good for them to get in there early is what I mean. Yes. The point that we're making, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right. So again, we will certainly keep an eye on basketball recruiting as spring turns into summer. Let's turn to the mailbag. We've got a few here for football, including a 6-part mailbag question, a rapid fire question from DBlaze75 from the message board. We'll start off with that one. Again, some rapid fire, very early predictions. Number 1, which running back finishes the season receiving and running with A, most yards, and B, most touchdowns? Who wants to take this one first?
Clement Bonner. Clement yards, Bonner touchdowns.
I would have said the same thing. And we need to go faster if these are rapid fire.
Carolina Sam?
Oh, I said ditto. Yeah.
I didn't hear you say ditto. Clement and Bonner? Yeah, I'll go with that too. Number 2, does D'Wan Mathis finish top 2 on the team in rushing yards?
No.
Yeah, I'd say
so.
I'd say probably not, but I'm curious to Sam and Kyle who you think would finish ahead of him, because I don't know if I have a. I mean, if there is going to be so much movement in the backfield, I think there's a legitimate chance that those numbers are skewed a little bit. But I would assume that one of those guys in the backfield really emerges.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we want to give up on the rapid fire part, I'm more than happy to flesh out my answer. I think people look back at like NIU offenses and they go, oh, okay, like Jordan Lynch rushed for 1,200 yards or 2,000 yards or whatever it was, and blah blah. I still think this offense is going to primarily try to use the quarterback to throw the ball. And I think that I think the fact that there are that many running backs that close to the top is a reason why Mathis won't be top 2. Because I think you're going to see Clement, Bonner, whether it's Sadie or Ruley, whoever it is, I think they're all going to get so many touches that I think it's just going to, I think I agree. I think you're going to see a lot of people in the like 400, 500, 300 rushing yard range, but I think Mathis will be a little below that.
Yeah.
Or that being said, now he's probably going to rush for like 1,500 yards.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you, Kyle. I just think that with a young quarterback in there, you would like to set up the run game and the play action, that sort of stuff, just to get him comfortable. And that's, always a cliche but at the same time, like, yeah, they want to have more designed quarterback runs because Anthony Rousseau wasn't exactly mobile, but what does that look like? I mean, Yaramovich had 8 to 12, maybe rushes a game. I think that's him just kind of talking, whatever, maybe trying to throw something out there to, in
the end, you got a lot of wide receivers you got to keep healthy.
Exactly.
Keep happy, I should say. That like you can't all of a sudden take, hey, a quarter of our offense is going to be running the ball with the quarterback because Jaden Blue wants his 100 catches.
And at the end of the day, like, Mathis is your quarterback 1. You also want to keep him healthy. Do you really want him rushing the ball 15 times a game?
Yeah, very good point. Question number 3, which wide receiver finishes the season with A, the most touchdowns, B, the most receptions, and C, the most yards?
Touchdowns, Randall Jones. Receptions, Jaden Blue. Yards, Randall Jones.
Stole my answer, Kyle. Sam?
Just have to be a wide receiver, I guess. Let's go most touchdowns, Randall Jones, most receptions, Jaden Blue, and most yards, Jaden Blue.
I'm going to ditto Sam. I think receptions and yards are both Jaden Blue, and touchdowns is Randall Jones.
I'll just say, as always, I am a big Randall Jones fan. If he stays healthy, he's going to put up numbers.
What movie do you think of when you hear the word ditto?
I think of the Pokemon. So I don't think of any movie.
Hating myself here. Did anybody see Ghost?
With Swayze.
Yeah. All right, I'm old.
Actually, I don't think
Anyway,
I saw it. I just watched Roadhouse for the first time like a couple years ago.
there you go. That's a great one. Question number 4 from DBlaze75's rapid fire early predictions. A question here: who leads the D in sacks?
I think Manny Walker is going to have a pretty solid year.
Yeah, Manny Walker was my choice.
Manny Walker.
Let's see, Will Rogers. Just as do I fully believe that? I'm not sure. Am I just trying to be a little bit of a contrarian here? Possibly, but I'll go with that. Stick with that. Number 5, who leads the defense in interceptions?
I was originally going to say Keyshawn Paul, but I'm going to change it because I don't think he's that much of a ball hawk. I'm going to say Deshaun Winston.
Ooh. I'm going to go with a out of the box. Well, not that out of box. Freddie Johnson. Why not? Former receiver.
Sam Cohn does not like that answer.
No, I'm just trying
Are
to
you
think.
just
those
straining?
are
You
two
look
good-
like an old man
I'm-
trying to read.
I'm just trying to get wrinkles by 30. I'll take Freddie Johnson too. I'll agree with Carolina Sam here.
I like the Deshaun Winston answer, or maybe even. Yeah, I like the Deshaun Winston answer. I like that one a lot. Next one, next number 6, the defensive tackle position is extremely thin, especially with Gill's injury, which we just talked about. Odds that Temple can pick up a starter or two through the portal by the start of training camp.
This one I don't think is as much of a rapid fire question, but I don't think 2. I think if you're putting on your rosterbation hat, I think you want to add a starter at defensive tackle, and I think you want to add depth probably at defensive tackle. So I would say they probably had 1 starter.
Yeah, I would agree with 1 starter at defensive tackle, but I mean, what does a starter look like there? Because they love to rotate in interior. I mean, for all we know, Kevin Robertson and Nick Baggs can start there or something like that. Are they going to see the majority of the snaps? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that, I mean, Carey said like that the injury to Gill actually happened there in winter workouts. So that makes sense with the fact that they were trying to get Weston Kramer in here then from NIU. They knew about Gill's injury and they still thought with the people they had that they needed to bring in a likely starter.
Who was just talking up Kevin Robertson?
Jeff Knowles.
That's right.
He showed up like in shape, right?
Yeah, a few times his name has come up. We'll see.
I one of the defensive linemen talked about him too, as somebody who stood out. Maybe Manny Walker.
I just wonder, like, they've been blessed in a sense the past couple of years that they had that half a season stretch where Ifeanyi Maijeh was great. They had Dan Archibong as a 4-year starter. Like, I wonder with like a year like this, are they expecting somebody to come in and be like, hey, you're playing 70 snaps a game? Or is it a situation where like we want to throw 4, 5, 6 defensive tackles into that rotation?
That's why I think it's likely, again, complete guess. Do I think at this point in the spring season that they'll get, I think it's plausible that they get 1 starter and 1 depth guy. I kind of just have a feeling that they're just going to bring in a couple of guys that are rotational guys, and they'll say, hey, they can come in and compete. We can see them adding depth to the room. I'd be surprised if they got a guy that was kind of a real eyebrow raiser, but I could be wrong. All right. Thank you for the 6-part rapid fire question there, DBlaze75. Next question from Green Street Al. Does Brandon Mack get drafted since he ran better than teams thought at the Temple Pro Day? You have to figure someone might take a shot with his size. So does Brandon Mack get drafted?
Gun to my head, no.
Yeah.
I think he's a priority free agent guy.
Yeah.
I agree with Kyle. I think unless Matt Rule wants to throw him a bone in like the 7th round or something like that, maybe as one of his guys, or I just don't see him getting drafted, but he will be in a camp somewhere. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to think.
And this wasn't asked, but that would be my same opinion with Dan Archibong too. I don't think he gets drafted. I think he gets in somebody's camp.
All right. Let's head over.
Gun to your head.
Okay.
Question from Kyle Gauss. Where does Quincy Roche get drafted? Like round wise?
3rd round.
Yeah, I think 3rd or 4th. I don't think his draft stock necessarily went up over the last year.
Yeah, he gets taken with one of those comp picks in the 3rd round.
Yeah, even more specific. So I'm like, I don't know, man. We're trying to trade up to get a quarterback.
Yeah, Mac Jones to New England, right?
All right. So that'll do it for this week's episode of The Scoop. Big thanks to Kyle, Sam, and Sam for joining me once again. Big thank you to all of you for tuning in once again to listen. If you are listening to this directly from the Al Scoop site and you haven't subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or whatever site or whatever area you're accessing your podcast, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. The more ratings and reviews we get, the more it elevates Temple Sports Talk in the podcast world. So we appreciate you doing that. Looking forward to talking to all of you again next week. Hope you're having a great week, a great month. Hope everyone is safe, happy, and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.